Okay.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Wednesday. It is time for the... Actually, it's past time, let's be honest. But it's time for the Mattriarchy. I am, as per usual, your host, Matt Reese, coming to you from recently rainy but currently sunny Scottsbluff, Nebraska. Say, well, we have been having a wet spell here in town. It rained most of last week, which is strange for our semi-arid environs, I'll tell you, but that's okay. Tonight, we are talking about the departed Peter David. And possibly, we'll see how it goes. Butch Guice also passed away a few weeks ago. I'm not super familiar with his work, but Michael said he had some things he wanted to say. Peter David, for me, was an important comic book writer in my own life. Young Justice, Aquaman. The man has spent time living in my subconscious for decades. And so I wanted to take some time to discuss his works and go from there. But before we get on with that, let's introduce the panel today of our regular hooligans. We have the Metal joining us.
Howdy. It's also been abnormally rainy for the area I'm in, which is extremely weird considering that I'm in the middle of the desert. It's been the rainiest. Yes, in Arizona. Wow. It's been the rainiest that it's been in over a decade. My roommate claims that I brought it with me. It's my fault that it's rainier, so that's perfectly fine with me. But if everybody knows me, I'm the creator of X Dynamis Chaos, and you can find most of the works I actually care about over at xdynamischaos.com. And if for some reason you find my website just annoying to navigate, and I wouldn't blame you if you do, on the sidebar, you will find plenty of other links where you could read it in much better formatted websites, especially if you go over to Fables, where I will get ad revenue. I would not blame you at all for preferring to read it over on that website. Wink, wink.
We're also joined by a recently back from the sick ward, Cartoonicus.
Stay tuned, although you won't hear much of my voice tonight because it's still out a bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you've survived your brush with whatever virus it is that will knock you low. Might be melodramatic, but I do feel that way.
Thank you.
And of course, Hutch himself from You Lousy Kids. How's it going, Hutch?
Hey, it's going well for having lost two great creators this month. Butch Guice is only 9 years older than me, so I'm looking at the the Grim Reaper here going, stay away.
You never can tell. You never have it's never guaranteed. That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. I lost 2 uncles within 2 months.
Whew.
One just last week.
That's rough, man. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I do need to correct you, Matt, that I am very sure that you have seen Butch Guice's work. It's
sure.
Axton Guice, also known as Butch Guice. He went by both names in his professional career. But I think he preferred Butch. And
I'm sure I've seen it.
Yeah.
I was just unaware that he existed until 2019. And the reason the way I came across the name, right, and was that Mitch Breitweiser went on a tear one day talking about how amazing Butch was and how Butch was coming to work for him. And I was like, okay, I've not heard of that guy. And so I'm sure he's been around. And I heard Chuck's drive time, Chuck Dixon, a few weeks ago talking about his friendship through the years with Butch and some of the projects they talked about that he had worked on were things that I had heard about, but for whatever reason, I had not noticed or recalled his name at all.
Right.
So, that is probably because I, as a young comic reader, and as a early 20s comic reader, and as a mid 20s comic reader, I've paid far more attention to the writers than the artists typically.
Yeah.
And so my memory of the artists is only if like I mean, Brayfoggle, like
Yeah.
just like, I mean, like his stuff was like legendary, and it's so formational to my appreciation of comics.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like I said last week. I discovered it was Steve Rude that did that World's Finest mini that I love so much. I've sat down. I've talked with Mike Barron, and he goes on about Rude all the time. And I never put two and two together until last week on that one.
Well, speaking of Mike Barron wrote the Flash #1. He took over Wally West. The first 10 issues, or first 10 of the first 11 issues were Butch Guice's art.
Oh,
so
okay.
he's the one who did that story with Mike of Wally West delivering a heart, running across country with it, which was such a good story that they adapted it into Young Justice, and of course gave no credit whatsoever to the creators. Yeah.
Wow.
Mike said that was that's what you get when it's pay for, what do you call it? Pay for play. It's like we own the story. We don't even need to acknowledge that you wrote it. It's just, even if everybody loves it good enough to adapt it, and it's adapted much more closely than a lot of the stories that they do take from comics.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like I said, I had not. That's something that was news to me today. So
yeah,
I'm certainly.
To be fair, only nerds read the credits anyway. Everybody else just looks at the pictures.
Yeah.
maybe that's it.
But we're all comic book readers.
Yeah. But I can't sit here. So I can't sit here and talk about Butch's history any other than, I mean, that the stuff I have seen I've always thought was really great. But once again, that was even a storyline I didn't even, or not a story, a run I did not know was Butch's. So
yeah. I think I don't know how long Mike Barron lasted on the title too, because I think that by the issue 20 there was a new writer on it.
I believe so. Yeah. But even a lot of the stuff that he did even ended up in the being retrofit onto Barry in the 90s Flash series and stuff like that too. Right. There were lots of elements of his original run that got put in there.
Yeah, so, like the whole calorie thing, I believe, was Mike Barron was the first one who came up with that. That he's got to ingest. Of course, that's kind of ridiculous because, I mean, they incorporated it into the movie, the bad movie, where he's actually got a meter that tells him how many ergs of energy he has left unless he eats a candy bar or something. It's like that was, but that's the movie, and it's never once referred to again, even though he's running at the speed of light.
See, and I had not seen the movie. And I had.
You don't need to see the movie.
See, now I'm sad that I know that much about it. So
I'm sorry. We don't need to talk about the Flash movie. We're not here to talk about the Flash movie. But and then the other thing you'd know from him is that he went to CrossGen and he did the book Ruse, which was their Sherlock Holmes variation. And so he had a run on that, and he moved in 2001 and was one of the guys, since he's such a friend of Chuck, he's the one saying, this is really good, you should come down here. And Chuck was telling us about everybody who's drank the Kool-Aid, and then like 6 months later he's moved down there. So if it wasn't for Jackson Guice, Chuck probably wouldn't be living in Florida. So it's like that. So it probably impacted his life more than even though I think Chuck and Jackson did the Storming Paradise book, which was about if America had to invade Japan, didn't nuke it, instead did a land invasion. And it's a good book. So that's the two of them did that for Wildstorm. And that's all I need to say about Jackson. There's a lot of stuff that you've probably read that has been his artwork, but like you say, we don't necessarily look at the names of the pencilers. Sometimes we may go, that's really good art on this book. Half the time we don't remember to look and say, who was it? Who was the penciler? Who was the inker?
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think that's different for some people too. I mean, just how they approach the medium. But because I've always thought about it, from a writer's perspective, that's just kind of how I've looked at it to that. So,
there's other people who just love the art and couldn't tell you the story. Yeah.
So, well, even then too, right? If you do just love the art, which there are a lot of people are in that category, you have to look at, in a lot of cases, two different people. right? Because comics, due to the kind of factory process that was made, you get this transformative art where somebody lays down the backbone and then somebody refines it, right? So you've got two different people that have cultivated the art of the book that you're reading. And then also on top of that, you might have a different colorist who also gives a completely different definition. And you might have three people that have formed that art that you have to look at. And that's a lot of work for the average person. There's like, I just like the art.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too. Going back to my love and affection for Breyfogle, I always, and not that I dislike his other work, but I have so preferred when Breyfogle was inked by Steve Mitchell, because like the starkness of those designs, they just jump completely off the page and wrap themselves around my subconscious in ways that like just affected my entire appreciation for the medium of hero comics. So, or genre, I guess I should say. But once again, so I mean, I totally see what your point with knowing the team. But I guess probably the first time that I looked at Guice's art and knew what I was looking at was the art that he did for Brightweiser for that what was the book? It was one of his second run books after he had launched and had not fulfilled Red Rooster. I can't remember the name of it right now. But I was definitely blown away by the art, but also very angry that I did not have my chicken book. So that also that colored my desire to see anything further from that at that point. Sorry, I'm petty. So, but yeah. So now I do not remember what it was that the Guice had died from.
Oh,
it was
I actually have his
something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Not to be morbid, but
no. I've got his Wikipedia open here, as you might imagine. I was checking it to see pneumonia. Yeah, he died of pneumonia on May 1st.
Wow. That's rough.
Common way to go.
Well, it is somewhat, but it's also somewhat less common than it used to be. You know, so that's unfortunate. So, I'm not a doctor, but if I remember right, sometimes you can have pneumonia and not realize what it is, and then all of a sudden it's super severe.
Yeah.
So that's
well, because there's colloquially you have walking pneumonia, where it's like you feel maybe something fluid or tightness in your chest, and it's fine, and that can swing either way. Either you can just recover from it and you have that little spell, or it can just drop into like there's just so much fluid in your lungs and your body can't get rid of it, and then you're just in this extreme case of kind of like debilitating pneumonia.
Yeah, that's crazy.
If you could, I put up the picture of the Flash #1 if you want to see an example of some of his art from, well, this is from back in the 80s, obviously. So of course he got even better over the decades, but he was good enough to be the guy who relaunches the Flash, And here's a good picture. So it's he's pretty good at capturing the characters, and I don't know what else to say. That's the bad part, is I don't know how to talk about art. I like art. I don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know. One of the things that I'm really noticing about the pages here that we're looking at is the great use of angles in and out to keep this talking heads page super engaging.
Yeah.
And I talk about that. I've talked about that not infrequently with people about that. And it's something that like there's been a lack of in many comics in the last 10 years, where a lot of first timers and even some pros, they are so in the frame of thinking about this idea of comics in terms of movies or in terms of storyboards that they forget that they're telling comics. I mean,
So as an artist, I'll say I'm not a big fan of the face shapes, particularly in here, especially some of the angles that the heads are kind of contorted at. But something I can compliment a lot is I really like his use of shadows between the spotted blacks and the hatching, because they're not here to look realistic like where the shadows are. They're here to direct the eye, and they're doing a very good job of that.
Yeah.
I really like this page.
Yeah, the panel breaking that actually serves a function in the story.
Yeah,
is great. I've always liked that feature.
I noticed in the beginning he was hanging out with the Young Justice there, or Teen Titans.
Well, I was about to smack you.
Clearly, the red hair says this is Wally. So was this when he first graduated to the Justice League?
Yeah, it's when he first graduated to being the Flash.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think he was in the Justice League. This was back. This would be the same era. I mean, they both spun out of Legends. Yeah, so this is the time of the Keith Giffen Justice League. Was the same month that this published, I believe.
Yeah, it would have been. He got onto the Justice League on JLI when that was when International was launched.
That's right.
You're saying he was Flash with the Titans still?
Not really.
No, he kind of just broke off and did solo Flash things.
Did his own thing.
Even as Kid Flash, he wasn't necessarily with the Titans during some of that time. There were times he was with them, and there was times that he was not officially a Titan, and there was times that he lost his powers. And
that's true. Up until Crisis, he basically didn't even have powers. It was like they came in and out, so he wasn't in the new Teen Titans for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So wait, is this that story you were telling us about in Young Justice?
Yeah, this one where he's running the Heart Across Country and
so he did that as the Flash. They transferred it into Kid Flash for the show.
Right.
Interesting.
So it's I forget where, but somewhere in here is where he says, "Did anybody order a pizza?" And they're like, "This is not a joke." And he says, "I'm not joking. I need a pizza." It's like, I need calories. So that was that line actually made it into the cartoon. And
that's funny.
Yeah.
Is it just straight up a McDonald's?
It's yes, it is. It is not a McDonald's.
Usually don't see that. Yeah.
It's not a Big Belly Buster. I think this might be before the Big Belly Buster was a thing.
Yeah, the Big Belly Burger.
Big Belly Buster Burger. Yeah.
I've had a few of those.
And then after all that running the heart across country, he comes home and there's a box for him and he opens it and there's a heart inside it. It's from a gift from Vandal Savage.
Ooh.
That's like, what a way to end the issue.
They didn't do that in the show.
Well, yeah, but it was the heart of the guy he was killing along the way. I love that the Flash sees him strangling a guy and is 20 miles down the road before he even remembers to slow down. That's why you see that big trail through the snow, which is cool.
That's a killer panel.
Yeah,
I don't think I have a single complaint about this panel.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. Live as the Flash, die as the Flash. My gosh,
I've always liked Vandal. He's such a great guy.
Is this not the most Mike Baron page I've ever seen? I mean, this is like the quintessential Mike Baron page. That's amazing. That's got that tough guy written all over it. That's amazing. Yeah. I can't believe I've not seen this page before. Oh, that's great.
Makes me want to go back and pull out all the issues I have, but I don't remember if I think I had the second issue and then I think I dropped it for a while. I don't know. I was a little fussier back then, a little more choosy about where my dimes went,
Well, when you have dimes, you got to be, right? That's the
you know what makes that panel so good, right? It's not even just the foreground. It's how everything kind of like stays consistent.
This one?
Yeah,
the last one, all the way into the background, right? Like you have the exact same tone, just fading off into the background too. Like this is just a very well
as
done
details
panel.
Get finer and finer. Yeah,
and even like the way the clouds are done in the background, it's like you just have this consistent tone across it.
Yeah. And this is so remarkable too. One last thing I want to point out here, as far as just that time period. is this is all done with like, the 4-color process, right?
Yeah.
So now we're seeing a digital recreation of that, but it still has those sections of color that still have to give that impression by blending it in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And just thinking about how effective those old 4-color tools were, and how dependent we are on these flood fill processes.
I would like that panel as just a poster, just like on its own. That would be great.
Yeah. That you could like republish this as his page in Who's Who for Vandal Savage. And
for sure. Yeah.
And what makes it great too, if you wanted to make it a poster, you could even kind of make it even more menacing and plain, because the bubble, right, is just sitting in black, and you could easily just spot over that and just have them there staring menacing without any words whatsoever.
That's true. Yeah. And I think just the little box down here, you can easily cover that too.
Vandal in the house.
Vandal in the house.
Oh man,
I'd probably get rid of the next month part, but I think I'd leave the Vandal in the house. I think that would be a good touch to the poster.
Hello, Fly Fox. How's it going? So, well, do you have anything else, Hutch, that you wanted to say about Guice before we move on?
No. This is. Thank you for letting me just cover a few things of his. I mean, he's probably, like all great artists, going to be discovered more after his death and appreciated more just from the people, talking about him. And
and I think that's especially true because while he seems to have had, I don't know this. I only know this academically because I've heard people talk about it, that he did have a large body of work for somebody like, with that level of spotlight. He still was pretty young.
Yeah.
Right. And he said he's a few years older than you, but I mean, for a lot of comic artists, they have a lot of comic artists have made it a long time and been able to keep producing. Some have, some haven't, but to keep producing work, much later,
Yeah.
And that's
he was only 26. I was 17. He would have been 26 because he's 9 years older than me. He was 26 and doing that Vandal Savage page. He lands the new book for DC at 26 years old. It's like, I always thought of, at the time I'm looking at, all these comic book guys must be like in their 40s. You must get to work at DC when you're in your 40s and 50s and you're good enough. And it's like, by the time I was trying to break in, I was like overdue. I should have been trying to break in when I was a teenager. Because a lot of these guys were. It's like I'm like
never too early to start,
Yeah, but I'm like 28 and going. When I grow up, I'd like to be a comic book
started
artist.
Around 17. Jim Shooter when he was 16.
What's that? Sorry, I'm talking with you. I'm sorry.
Well, I said Robert Kirkman was starting to. He broke in when he was like 17.
Yeah.
Jim Shooter, I think, was 16 when he started writing. It's being in the right place at the right time, man, makes all the difference.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you, Scotts Bluff is not the right place. I mean, I like it here, but I should have known.
Well, I started learning. I learned so much more about the comic book industry once the internet came along. I mean, as we know it, and that was like when I was 25 in 1995. So, every time I talk to somebody about how to break into comic books, their story is different. And generally, everybody whose story is like, I just called up Denny O'Neil and said, could I write Batman? And it's like, that works. And it's like, well, he doesn't let you call him now. And it's like, well, shoot, but it worked for somebody. And then the next guy didn't get in that way. And it's like, yeah. But by the time I figured out that the ironclad way to get in is to already be doing a comic book for somebody else. Work for one of the other comic companies and work your way up so that you're noticed. And anyway, that's just it amuses me that he was big. He was big when he was 26. You don't land the Flash #1 without being a good artist.
Especially back like a #1 was a really big deal for an established, for an established property. I mean, Wally West was the new Flash, but I mean, he was still a known quantity.
Yeah.
The Flash had been selling, decently prior to that. I mean, it was ebbs and flows, right? But it was still one of those things where there were people that expected the Flash. So, but yeah, it was quite a feat. So, Isaac says, when you are ready, you are ready.
Yeah.
The question is are the people writing the checks ready when you're ready? That's the ticket.
Well, if you look at it from like a external universal perspective, it's when everything's ready, it's ready. Mm-hmm. So you could think you're ready, but because you haven't started yet, you're not actually ready. Yeah. When they hand you that check, well, you're ready.
There's a thing I used, somewhat related. There's a little thing I used to say. Let me see if I can remember how to say it. There's things you need to know and things you don't need to know. And the way you know the difference is that you know what you need to know, and what you don't need to know, well, you don't know it. And if you know you need to know it, well, then eventually you'll know it. But if you don't know that you need to know it, chances are you'll never know it. And you'll know when you need to know, because then you'll know.
Yep.
So I used to say that to people to confuse them. They'd start doing that, the math meme, right?
Oh, I always tell people that it's one of my superpowers, but in a roundabout way of thinking, you could actually just apply this to every person ever. But I'm always exactly where I'm supposed to be at the right time.
I would like to claim that, but I'm far too clumsy. I've definitely been in the wrong place at the wrong time. I am where I think a door should be, and anyhow. So
hey, if you weren't where the door should be, there's some conversations you probably would have missed otherwise.
That's possible. So moving on, of course, as I mentioned in the beginning of it, Peter David passed away last week, and for me, that was quite shocking. I mean, everybody dies. He's getting up there in years. Mm-hmm. And of course, I had some health problems, but like, I don't know that I can even express how much Peter David's work was just a part of my existence for decades. One of the most, he did Young Justice. He did Aquaman, with Jim Calafiore doing the art. Another artist that just like takes up spare time in my brain. He wrote before he started doing Aquaman, he did the Atlantis Chronicles, which actually did such a great job of like marrying DC's aquatic lore into this huge mythic thing, and gave Aquaman the kind of gravitas that he's always deserved. And I don't agree with every plot decision he made in there, but they were really flawlessly rendered. And then there's some other stuff that I've read of here and there, but his Supergirl was ridiculously good. But also his there's the Captain Marvel series that he did, with Genis Vell, the son of Marvel. Just great adventure stuff. And I only read a few issues of that, but it was super fun. And the man had such, there are some comic creators and some writers, I should say, generally speaking, who when whenever they step up to bat, it's a home run, right? Or a strike. And and Alan Moore is one of these. He either writes an amazing story that just is gripping, or it's just drivel. It's just absolute nonsense. There's no middling Alan Moore story. But then there are some people that, this is a third base run, second or third base run every time out, right? And every once and again, knock one into the stands. And I feel that like Chuck Dixon and Peter David are two of these guys that they're always getting onto second or third base in every story. And then they've got the ones that are just, the grand slam. I've never read a Peter David story that left me like, well, that was trash. Every issue that has his name on it that I've picked up, I've enjoyed thoroughly. And there is such a that feels incredibly rare in the modern world. And I just want to take some time to kind of appreciate the level of craft and the dedication to engaging and entertaining the audience. Right? And being willing, and we've got a particular story that Hutch wanted to talk about, but the other thing about David's stuff is he seems to have this desire to be true to the characters he's telling the story about. And there are things that his characters would do that David would not, right? because he's got this honesty about his writing. That's my take on it. Hutch, let me ask you, since you're the senior statesman, if you forgive the term here,
sure,
you've been reading comics the longest of all of us. What was your entryway into Peter David's opus?
I can tell you exactly. At the end of the first DC Comics run of Star Trek, Peter David came on, and I'd never heard of this guy before. I don't know if he had done novels before that or what, but obviously big Star Trek fan. But the stories at the end of that run were very good. I can't tell you anything in particular that stood out. I just remember really liking it and being surprised that the book got canceled when it's really getting good. This was a good writer who's taken over on this. And I think he must have done like the last maybe 10. I don't know. The first run of Star Trek, they introduced a few characters of their own because, of course, you can't develop the main cast of Star Trek. So they had like lower deck officers, as they call them now, that they could explore. And they had a Klingon in Starfleet, which they then had to disavow, of course, when Worf joined Starfleet, when Next Generation came along. But Peter David was then employed as the writer on the new run of Star Trek. And then this would have been like 89, I think. This was a new format comic. Had a very interesting 3-issue arc where there is a terrible bounty hunter named Sweeney that everybody is afraid of. And when he arrives, he is obviously John Cleese. And John
Cleese usually is.
Yeah, and everybody is just terribly frightened of him, but he is a efficient bounty hunter and killer, but he otherwise acts just like John Cleese would. So it's very funny. I mean, it's not he has a knack of being able to do humor without it devolving into a funny book. He can put a humorous situation into Star Trek without it being kind of like Marvel movies where everything is a joke,
Well, and I mean, and think about his not to derail you off the Star Trek thing.
No,
just one quick thing on there.
I'll get back to it. Peter
David's work on She-Hulk, which I did not come to when it was new. I was far too young to care about girls when that was out. But so it wasn't until I was probably in my mid-20s that I was exposed to it through the internet, through people talking about this book. And I have not read extensively, but I have read enough to get it. And what David was able to do with humor in a book that was still an action book, right? But the self-awareness of, we're telling it's a Hulk book, but it's got a pretty girl in it, and we know why you're reading this book, all you scabs. Poking fun at the audience, but also not like shaming the audience either, right? Because everybody's in on the joke.
Yeah.
But you're also it's not just played for laughs. It's still like serious, right? And that's like one of my issues with like the Patsy Walker Hellcat book that came out about a decade ago, where they were trying that same kind of tone, and they even tied the beginning of her story into She-Hulk so they could have that cred of doing the serious, not serious story. But it was clear that the writer, whose name escapes me at the minute, was not taking any of it seriously. Where what David used is he used humor to punctuate the drama and drama to punctuate the humor, right? Which is something that we all should have learned from our great uncle Bill Shakespeare, right? Not to say that She-Hulk was Shakespearean.
Well, I mean, also anyone who grew up in the 90s with like every sitcom of the time and like all the famous stuff that we all love, How I Met Your Mother, every cartoon on Netflix. I mean, that's always the big thing, is that it's this balance between major drama and major comedy. Like that's what people already naturally are always praising about, every popular thing that comes out within the last like 30 years.
Well, and I think
you could even get from like Shakespeare's influences too. Like you can go all the way back to like Greek theater, and they were doing that. It's how we like.
I'm just saying, it's like it's nothing it's nothing unknown at the time. It's kind of our culture at the moment. You would think it would just be natural.
But I think one of the things that sets David apart in this is that he was able to thread that needle. That balance was perfect, and it wasn't just that it was perfect. It was that he could turn it on and off, right? Right. So when he was writing the high fantasy aspects of Aquaman, he wasn't going into the sarcastic She-Hulk palette, right? He was dealing, he was rendering it in the tone of the stories that were supposed to be. He understood that genre distinction between the genres, right? And he understood that well enough to break it when he needed to, but to cleave even to it when the story demanded it, right? And another great example of that is his work on Young Justice, which I just voraciously absorbed. So I just
keep talking a second. You keep talking. You hold it down for another minute.
All right. So that's one of the things that I have just so appreciated about his stuff. And like another really great example of his ability to thread this needle is especially the second run of X Factor from like 2004, 2005, where the Madrix was the team leader, and it had a bit of like noir drama aspects to it, and a bit of slice of life comedy aspects to it. But there were several times in the story where the comedy and the implications of the comedy's situations that he laid out in X Factor actually became horrifying because of the nature of the stories he was telling. And it didn't feel like you were having the rug pulled out from under you. It's like, here is a situation, like one particular instance was the Madrix clones. He had Jimmy Madrix, Multiple Man, had sent out clones all over the world and hadn't called all of them back. And so there was a whole side quest in several stories where he's going around collecting his clones who have been living their own lives. And some of those stories that he ends up with are silly and nonsense, and it's funny to watch it unravel. And some of them are heart-wrenching, where for Madrix to complete himself, he may actually destroy the lives of many people. And that balance of like, okay, now here's an implication I'd never thought of, and here I'm being asked to take it seriously. And where do I stand on all of this? Do I think that Madrix will do the right thing? Well, I mean, which is even the right thing in these circumstances, right?
Yeah. And it's definitely a show of sheer talent of almost like a level of genius to be able to switch between modalities, like the models of the worlds and genres that you're working in on basically a dime. Because almost anybody can work in those different modes, but a lot of people need to basically do warm-up work in between it to be able to like ease themselves back into whatever mode they're supposed to be in. But to be able to shift between them like that is like an extra level of mastery that most people don't even get to.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, sorry to distract you, to take you so far afield.
I was looking for a different book. The Trial of Captain Kirk is the one that has Sweeney. He's capturing Kirk so that he can be put on trial. And some of the things that are brought up are, I mean, they even revisit some of the old episodes, like the one where he blew up the computer that is simulating the war so that there is no actual radioactive fallout. And then people just report to the dying chambers, you know. He zapped the computer and then left. And we get to see like what happened to some of these planets after he left. So that was an interesting story. Obviously, it goes from comedy to high drama of Kirk being put on trial for his violations of the Prime Directive. So I was looking for that book. I find this one. I was saying that this is like his end run. This is his end run of the first Star Trek. It was captured, and I forgot about that. And so this is basically the last run, and it starts with Peter David. This may be where he took over, or he might have done a few episodes before or issues before this. But what I want to talk about is that in that second run of Star Trek, this is when the new format, it was a prettier format, it was a little higher price point, but it looked great compared to the old one, which was newsprint, you know. He did about the first 18 issues. He ended with issue 19, which if you could show people, issue 19 is the I just love this story. And if you are at all interested in Star Trek, I would encourage you to hunt this one up. It is Star Trek number 19. It is a tribute to what we now call the red shirts, the disposable crewman, the person who, you know, say, everybody important's going to beam down. Ensign Thompson, there's something smoking over there. Go check that out. And, you know, it became a gag a long time ago. And this is a very touching story about the entire time Kirk is trying to write the letter home to his parents, and he has to write the eulogy for this guy, and nobody got to know him. He had just transferred in, went to work in security, and he didn't open up to anybody in security. Chekhov, who's head of security, didn't get to really know him. And he's looking into this, Kirk is reliving the story of how these space pirates invaded the ship, and they were having a running battle with the crew, and this crewman died taking a dive in front of Kirk, saving his life from a phaser or whatever. And he's like, this is a guy who's died for me. He's like 19. He's got his entire life ahead of me. He'll never see 1/10 of the stuff that you and I have seen in our lifetime, Bones. All these wonderful things that were ahead of him, and he gave it all up to die for me. And I can't say a thing about him. I don't know. And this is what he says in the eulogy at the end. He says, I don't know. I don't know if he was ever in love. I don't know what his favorite food was. I don't know anything about him. And he just gives this great speech about the importance of a life never being left as, oh, that guy was here and he died. You know, you've got to value every single one of them. And the ending could pretty much be Peter David talking about death, which is, you know, touching because he just passed away. But it's about the importance of making your life count, because we never know how long we have. That's pretty much that last word bubble there. The bubble speech by Uhura is just, we don't know how long we have in this life, so we need to make sure we make it count. We need to make sure we reach out to each other so that we don't die unmourned and unknown. And it's a very touching story. This has been my favorite of Peter David's entire run on Star Trek. And he did novels. I don't know that he did Star Trek novels before he did writing of the comic books. I don't know which came first, but I do know that he was working on Star Trek: The Next Generation novels. He did one called Strike Zone that is about Worf meeting a whole bunch of Klingons who have come aboard. And one of them is female, and so Picard has to host all of them. He's like, I need to ask them to not carry their phasers, Worf. I realize that weapons are important to them. Is that going to be a problem? It's like, no, they'll put down their phasers. And he says, why are they willing to put down their phasers? He says, because they each have 10 other weapons on them, hidden somewhere on them. Every Klingon does. He says, every Klingon does? He says, yes. He says, do you have 10 weapons on you? He says, no. He says, how many weapons do you have on you? And he says, 14. and the lady Klingon is like, 14 in that outfit? Because he's not wearing armor. He's got this form-fitting outfit. She's like, that's amazing.
It's called efficiency.
They go and talk. Worf and the woman go and talk. It cuts back to them. The conversation that they have opens with, I wish I had the book in front of me. He's saying, I thought you'd be impressed by this. And she says, of course, it's amazing. And it's so big. And he says, yes, I sometimes like to pull it out and take a look at it. And she says, well, of course, every Klingon would be proud of this. It goes on like this for line after line after line. Finally, of course, he's talking about an award or a trophy or something on his shelf. And the conversation is just so ribald, and yet it will go over the head of any, child who's reading this book. And it was so funny that Michael Dorn actually read this with Peter David at a Star Trek convention, because he read it in front of the crowd because it was like a great dialogue, and he wished that it was in the show. And that's kind of an honor to be told that, we wish that I got dialogue like this. So that was the 5th Star Trek novel. I believe it was called Strike Zone. He did a one called Rock in a Hard Place, which was quite touching. I have to tell you a personal story. It's very funny. There's a character in it who you wonder what his backstory is throughout the whole thing. He's obviously a guy who's got like PTSD or something, and he's a Starfleet officer, but he's got something that just makes him a little off, and he's dealing with Riker. They're like surviving in an Arctic situation, and finally, like Riker's like hanging from something like a cliff, and this guy reaches out and lifts him up, and they beam up, and it's like, it's really weird because they're talking about what Riker has learned about him. I'm like, what the heck happened? I go back and I realize that I missed 2 pages because the ending of the first one fits so well into the sentence 2 pages later. I didn't realize I'd missed the 2 pages where this guy gives his entire backstory. It was baffling. I'm like, what the heck did I miss? I finally had to go back and reread it. So
I have done that exact thing.
You're reminding me of a Foxtrot comic.
And the only other thing I'll say about him, and I'll let you talk about him for a while, more about him, is that I just learned this after his passing, that he is the guy who wrote the series Bible for the Teen Titans cartoon on Cartoon Network.
Okay.
He's the guy who wrote the Bible of the show, of how each character should be interpreted, how we approach Starfire, and
so he's the reason why the cartoon Starfire acts more like Rumiko Takahashi's Lum than she does like Starfire.
Yeah,
which is not a complaint, mind you. I think it was a good decision, but
yeah. I've seen a lot of cartoons of her looking at the balloon bod version of her from other interpretations, going, I turn into that, and it's like, yeah. The Teen Titans, obviously they couldn't have the shapely swimwear model character. So these teens are more like preteens almost, the Teen Titans. They aged it down and
made it a lot less flirtatious.
Yeah. So his whole take on it, that was basically, I don't know that he came up with the concept, but he wrote the series Bible in working with the actual creators of the show, and they took several runs at it revising it, but that was him. And you could kind of, from all the humor in it and everything, it felt like it was something he was involved in. He was involved in it because they loved his take on Young Justice so much.
Right.
They felt that he should be involved in that and kind of getting a Young Justice take on it, unless, even though it's going to obviously be, Wolfman and Perez's take on the Teen Titans, they want to take these characters and make a Young Justice version of them. Mm-hmm. So that's what the show was. I didn't even know he was involved in that. So that was cool too.
And that's on the one hand, I think that's really cool, because I do appreciate all of the Davidness of the first series of that Teen Titans series. Mm-hmm. The things I like about it are the same things I like about Young Justice, and that's cool to see. But to find that out, and then to see about what DC did with Young Justice, the name, in just making a knockoff Teen Titans show, which I don't care for at all. Every episode of it I've seen, I'm only getting a handful. They're all just, I don't know. It makes me want to smack my face with things.
The actual Young Justice show.
The actual Young Justice show. Yeah,
I could not stand that show.
I hate that show. And
I loved it, but the last season was horrible.
It pales in comparison to the Teen Titans show.
So here is why I did not like that show. Right, the concept of Teen Titans was always a little silly. Right, mm-hmm. So even Perez, when his super serious New Titans, he would still use levity to break the stories down. He still had the kids / young adults behaving sometimes very seriously and sometimes a little silly, and there would be on and off consequences of all this kind of stuff, right? And so it was very much a drama show, doing superhero action, but that was always part of the mix. So taking it and aging those characters down so that you can do, so you can downplay the sexual tension and upplay the dynamic action, and then making it a little sillier, right, while still having some of those serious drama moments. That's fine. It's perfectly reasonable adaptation of Teen Titans, especially when you're looking at comparing the Bob Haney Teen Titans to the Wolfman Teen Titans. Having this more mature. I don't mean as in terms of adult or not adult. I mean mature as in come to its like the way plants mature or the way wines mature, right?
Yeah, so, I actually was going to say an alcohol or a cheese. This is something that's actually finally sat into what it's supposed to be.
And so the humor of Teen Titans was this more mature, even though it's a kid, even though it's kind of a kid show, it has this more mature sense of humor and taking on it than the original Teen Titans. And so it makes a good middle ground between the original old school Teen Titans and the Wolfman New Titans, right? And so that's perfectly fine. But Young Justice, and trying to do it serious, it's not Young Justice anymore, right? Young Justice does not have, it should have seriousness to it, but the beauty of what David did with Young Justice and why it was so formational to my concept of teen heroes is because it was perfectly in line with my idea of teen heroes. And it, for those of you guys who have read Force of Good and Evil, right?
All 10 of us.
Force of Good and Evil is, it's not me trying to do what David did with Teen Titans, but there's no way it could exist without what David did with Teen Titans. Does that make sense? Right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you can have these ridiculous, outlandish circumstances and yet the characters that are involved are seriously engaged in the action as it's going on and in the drama as it's going on, yet it's still, it'll never shying away from the comedic elements, yet never cheapening the dramatic elements. Right? So, in such a way that, like, the stakes are all real, even if, like, the boys are dumb boys because that's what boys are, and the girls are confused that the boys are dumb boys, and the boys are only really dumb because they're just giving each other crap the whole time, right? But when push comes to shove, Khan is brave and fearless. Bart is smarter than he thinks, and Tim holds everything together, right? So you do have these three, brothers of a different mother characters that all have different levels of silliness, yet they're still perfectly competent within their realm of expertise, and so it doesn't diminish. Nothing in Young Justice, despite it being a comedy book, nothing in Young Justice in any way diminishes from the seriousness of the core books that they came from, right? And so, like, so the Young Justice TV series had none of that, none of the charm, none of the humor, none of the flavor of any of it. It's just a bargain basement Teen Titans, like they're really trying to do Marv Wolfman's Teen Titans.
So it sounds like your biggest problem is just that they named it wrong.
I do think they named it wrong. Yeah, if they would have called it Teen Titans,
well,
but they didn't want to compete.
Look at it as Teen Titans. How is it new?
Well, see, then the thing is, if they called it Teen Titans, then they'd have to compete with this other version of Teen Titans that was already successful, right? And so they had to give it a different name, and they went with Young Justice.
But if you just
even if they called it Teen Titans, it's still a lesser Teen Titans.
It's still.
I agree, but I want to find out
what they would have done. What they would have done, cartoon, because what they have done is they have robbed Young Justice fans
you don't get a Young Justice
of the chance of ever seeing a really true adaptation of what is, I believe, one of the best books of the first decade of the second millennium. Right? It's one of the best books, and the fact that, like, it will always stay in this tiny little hole for Gen X fans is just depressing.
See, what I want to ask though is just like, if you can just close your eyes for a second, call it Teen Titans, then how would you judge it as a Teen Titans show?
Because it's, I don't know. I don't think it deals with the dynamics. It doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't deal with the character dynamics the same way, because it doesn't. You don't have. I don't know.
See, the funny thing is that we all agree clearly that the other Teen Titans show was better. But here's the thing: that other Teen Titans show also has nothing to do with the comic Teen Titans, right? It was its own thing. They reinvented it. They made it.
I wouldn't say nothing.
It happened to work, and we loved it.
Yeah, it is doing a lot of its own thing. It is going over the Trigon arc, which is the first arc of the new Teen Titans, so it does have that in common. But it is definitely trying to do its own thing in the fact that you can tell, and I'm guessing now that you've given me this revelation that it was a David who is really behind this, that they were leaning into the kind of like anime like uprising that was happening on American TV around that time, like the Toonami phenomenon. And a lot of the characters are like the characters, but their personalities and even some of like their designs are shifted to also be like archetypes from Japanese media. Like I mentioned, it is definitely very intentional that Starfire is more like Lum from Urusei Yatsura than she is like Starfire in many ways. And it's not just because they have to try to make her a little more family friendly. It's also because they're leaning into this like anime-ness, right? Robin himself is also more like a character from Ninja Science Team Gatchaman than he is Robin in some ways, right? And you can see that with all of them. Cyborg is almost more like a Tezuka character as well. They're playing heavily into this stuff. So it is Teen Titans, but it's its own thing at the same time.
It's more than that. They went over it themselves in the fact that they said, okay, if they're going to be teens, then let's pretend they're in high school. And that makes, okay, so Robin is the skateboarder, right? Beast Boy is the nerd. Sorry, what's his name? Cyborg is the jock. Raven is the goth. Starfire is the foreign exchange student, right, from another planet, basically. And they reinvented these characters under that arc, as well as the fact that, like, you talk about Robin. Which Robin is he exactly? Because he's kind of like all of them combined into one, right?
He is
He is technically Dick. Like, they confirm that in the Larry episode, because our kid's name is Dick Grayson backwards.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things is it is Dick Grayson, but the problem that I have this is not original to the Teen Titans series. They inherited this from Batman the Animated Series, where they gave Dick all of Tim's distinctives. They gave him the bow staff, they gave him the outfit, they gave him the hacker ability, they gave him, all of the stuff that were Tim's distinctives. They gave to BTAS gave to Dick. But
again, this also works in their favor with Teen Titans specifically, because all those things you mentioned about those different types of high schoolers are also necessary if you're trying to make it more anime, more or less, right? Like, these things are kind of one in the same. And him also kind of being the Gatchaman character, him having that kind of mix between him, having the bow staff. You look at all the poses he makes while he fights and stuff too. They're all like straight from what do they call it here? Battle of the Planets, I think, was the bad adaptation.
Yeah.
Bad. It's just straight from it. Yeah, they slaughtered it when they adapted it here.
But the music was wonderful.
Yeah, the music is. I'll give you that.
You got to remember stuff. Metal. You got to remember, Metal, that Hutch grew up with Battle of the Planets.
Yeah. It is true. It is true. It was butchered because they had to cut out everything. It's like the first episode, it's called The Rescue of the Astronauts. The astronauts in the original cartoon are killed. And so they have to fake it by saying, okay, we've got the astronauts, they're in the back of the ship. And you never see them because, of course, they were dead.
Yeah.
But to call the episode The Rescue of the Astronauts when they're dead in the original, that takes balls.
Yeah. Also, but it's all these things are happening at the same time. There's not like a single point to why this adaptation is what it is. There's like a lot of different flavors being mixed in.
And one thing I want to go ahead and point out too that Isaac points out here is they all had Saturday detention. You also cannot understand the amount of impact that Rat Pack films had upon 90s anime. So
the Mad Mod episode is obviously the best episode of the entire series.
Oh, that is such a good one.
Yeah, I could rewatch the Mad Mod episode just over and over again.
Yeah. And easily the best portrayal of Mad Mod that I've ever seen.
Yeah, and that's part of it. Is like in having the freedom to play with things, they were able to resurrect stuff from the Haney era that seemed a little goofy.
And that's
the deal. Not goofy, right?
Right, is that this show didn't exist in the DC universe. It existed in this Teen Titans bubble universe that they created.
Well, and I think it actually I think it fits in pretty good with Batman the Animated Series. It's just wearing different glasses. It's just like you have a different set of lenses that make the world look a little different, and the actual events that go on.
It would if they weren't intentionally trying to avoid supernatural stuff for most of Batman the Animated Series.
Yep, I'll give you that.
Yeah. The Teen Titans series may be divorced from the DCU, but the DCU ended up bringing in the Booyah for Cyborg. It brought in the ears and the name Beast Boy for Changeling.
Again.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, but it brought that back. It's like I liked the name Changeling, but apparently Beast Boy they went back to it. So they give him the little fangs in the ears now. And what's that?
I like Changeling too, but not in that context. I think Beast Boy's got more punch to it.
I suppose
it would be. Which I haven't followed the comics after that point or anything, but would be cool is if he kind of had like an attitude about it, where like everyone sarcastically called him Beast Boy, even though he keeps insisting people call him Changeling.
That's good.
That would have been really good. Well, and part of it too is like you talk about Cyborg, the Teen Titans version of Cyborg is in some ways the best version of Cyborg, because like one of the things from the classic interpretation of Cyborg is, it's, you have any Cyborg story that goes on, if it's more than one issue, and then by issue 3 he's complaining about everything that happened again, and then it's just morose moping for the rest of the storyline, and then you'll get a new writer come in and say, oh man, we got to get somebody in here to punch to life, and he'll meet a girl or solve a problem or save a kitten or something, and he'll really be pumped up and be great. Oh man, this new storyline's going so good, and 3 issues later he's moping about what happened to him. And they were able in the cartoon, the Teen Titans cartoon, man, it was his issues, his past, his hang-ups were present, but they were never overweening. And
they were good driving points for his character, because just when you think that he's gotten over it, they bring it back around. Like, did you really get over it? Like when he went to
he's always being put to the test.
Yeah, like when he went to go investigate the hive and everything, and then he's like, no, I actually am over it. Shows you.
I thought one of the most interesting episodes was the one where he is wrestling with the fact that he was an athlete, and he's like a bodybuilder, and yet as a cyborg, you're just told this has a level of this much weight that you can handle, and then it will break. And it's like, and he's like, but humans push themselves to be harder and to further more. And it's like, no, there's a maximum weight, and that's all you can do, because that's per specs. And it's like, that's 100%. You can't give any more than that. And it's like
everybody else is trying to tell him, like, no, you can. But he's like, this is what I was told. So don't tell me otherwise. You're not the one who put me together.
Right. It was an interesting. It's an interesting take on that, because we all understand he was going to be an athlete. Then he got to be a cyborg, and you can't compete if you're a cyborg, and he's lost what was going to be his future. And it is tough. I think I would be pretty whiny too if I was him. Probably worse. I'm a big whiner.
So, getting back to the point being...
Well, I was going to say that also mirrors like a Tezuka style story arc for his robots, because most of the time when he writes a robot, at first that's how you think it is. They're a robot that's put together, but then it's usually some type of emotional underpinning that allows them to get past whatever their limitation should have been. This actually happens directly with Astro Boy. And it's like, you could see the influence on the writing style there with the stuff they're trying to tap into.
So here's a question. Since you're talking about Cyborg, little deviation on things, but I want to get people's opinion. What is everybody's thoughts about the New 52 Cyborg, being married to, not literally married, but being tied in with
Apocalypse and everything?
Apocalypse and everything.
The Justice League.
I like Justice League War, the animation that took hold of all of that after the fact. But aside from that, like, I really don't like the fact that he's like basically born out of apocalyptic tech. Like, I just don't like that as a background for him.
Yeah, I really hated in the film where they were like, oh, doesn't know this cybernetic expert, this guy who's brilliant and he's been studying this for years. He's trying to save his kid and he just can't make it work. Oh, look, I happen to have a mother box in the back room. Like, let's just forget how much they massacred the concept of a mother box for that film.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm still so angry about that.
Oh, that's what
it's been like a decade, and I honestly want to punch people in the face. But
it's like, I like the film as a whole. That is one of my hangups about it. Right? There's a few. I've got like maybe 5 hangups on it.
There are many things about that film, but that one is so bad. I hate the film because
let's not get derailed on talking about this, because we.
I know.
But I do want to break. This is interesting, as you bring it back around in a circle, because clearly you haven't seen Young Justice season 3, because that's exactly what they went with.
Yeah, no, I haven't. So
anyway, back to my original point about how we've got these 2 different shows, and neither one of them is really anything close to what the comic version was. But one of them is a legend for all of time because of it. The other is kind of being judged as like, you're not that great.
Right.
I actually liked the first 2 seasons of Young Justice. It's a different taste. It's a different flavor, but I like it.
I did. It'll pale in comparison to Teen Titans.
Yeah.
But
the
I'm
third season is awful.
I just find it interesting how we've got these 2 very different ways of looking at. Is it simply because Teen Titans is that good with its writing that we don't care about the bubble and we go with it? Or is there another element that makes us want to go off the rail with that one, whereas we want to compare Teen Titans?
I think part of it's probably I think part of it's probably the nostalgia for the time it came in, right? So at least for me, maybe you too much on this, but you've got the whole Toonami thing. You've got that the Japanese style animation hitting the mainstream in a way that it was present before, but not mainstream before. And it's got all the fun and excitement that was wrapped up around like Powerpuff Girls, right? It's a little bit Japanese. It's a little bit American cartooning. It's got this humor.
It's got one of my favorite bands doing the main theme. Puffy, I love them. Yeah,
of course.
All right, here's the thing though.
Puffy's great. Okay, listen to their stuff.
I am the most Western artist you're ever gonna meet. I have never cared one iota about anime. Yet this is easily one on my top, 5 cartoons ever made.
Right.
So explain that one.
Well, it's because there's really
no nostalgia there whatsoever.
Well, because there's really no such thing as Eastern art and Western art, right?
Yeah.
So, like the things we think of as anime are things that Japan borrowed from Walt Disney and tweaked a little bit.
Right.
But Walt Disney borrowed those from Art Nouveau in France, and Art Nouveau in France borrowed them from Japan.
But what we're everybody's talking about, though, is that
influencing each other long term over
there's
time.
There's this 200-year cycle of things going from Japan to France to America to Japan to France to America to Japan to France to America, and so Teen Titans art style is the distillate of 200 years of artistic sharing.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say though is that, I'm that guy. I've always been the guy who thinks it's cool to hate on things that other people love just because they're popular, right?
Well, that sounds accurate.
Yeah, when the 90s rolled around and the anime boom hit, I wanted to be as far away from that as humanly possible, right? So right smack in the middle of all of this, out comes this show that it was clearly incredibly influenced by that. Nothing about the time or the trends or anything going on is going to be able to catch my attention in that and make me like it because of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is clearly something much, much deeper that actually, comes down to what that show was that makes me like it.
Yeah. Well, it's just good,
And I mean, the writing.
It's like the old breeding cliche, right? The blood allowed.
Well, I do need to point out. I know you guys don't like the Young Justice show, but it did have the same problem as Peter David's comic book, which was that they never call themselves the Young Justice team. That's never said. I don't believe it's ever said in the comic book. They're never given a name though, and it was weird that that's an element they carried into the animated show. Well, they call it team. Is it okay? The Justice League's going here, and the team goes here. And it's like you're not going to call it anything, just team. They do that season after season.
Well, see, and that was the beauty of the way David did it, right? Like, they weren't a team. There was people hanging out that occasionally had adventures, right?
Yeah.
And so there was no coordination with the greater strike force units. These weren't soldiers on behalf of some great war, because they were just buddies that would hang out, and every once and again they'd be stalked by a mercenary or they'd fight a monster or whatever. They were just bros.
It's funny because in the show they're clearly like, this training unit that is
right, which is the other
of Justice League.
Another reason I've never seen more than a couple of episodes, because the whole thing just sickens me, because it's not Young Justice, right? And in like the second issue of Young Justice, because they spun out of the Sins of Youth event, but in the second issue of Young Justice, people are like, "So what's your new?" They had Superboy and Impulse and Robin are hanging out, and they're just saving the day.
Not Sins of Youth. That was later.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But it was that one. It was that one that they also adapted into a cartoon where all the adults are gone.
Yeah,
and I don't remember what it was called.
But
it was.
Oh yeah, I like that one.
Anyway, that doesn't matter right now. It was a mini event with Clary and the Witch Boy and whatever.
Yep.
There was a Justice League Unlimited episode, 2-episode series that was based on that mini. That's what it was. Anyway. So the three guys are hanging out. They just saved the day from some monster. It may have been Mighty Endowed. I can't remember. But in any case, they just saved the day from some monster. And somebody says, "What's your team called?" I said, "We're not a team." I said, "Well, you guys are young heroes. Are you the Young Justice League?" I said, "Well, we're young, but it's just us. Young Justice. That's the name of the new team. We're not a team. We're just hanging out."
That's good.
And so, because the whole series was written from the perspective of the kids, they didn't have to have any kind of name, because they weren't on any kind of grand adventures. They were they were on grand adventures, but they weren't intending to be necessarily on grand adventures.
And to be honest, I like that more. Overall.
Well, it was perfect, because it was just like, because it was this, and I think it's underappreciated in the modern world, especially modern pop fiction. The idea that, you're not who you set out to be, you're who you are, right? This idea that our identities are not there just because we choose them. We do choose aspects of them, but they're also like, there's a lived reality of our experiences as we go along.
It's an emergent factor.
It's an emergent factor. And it was built into Young Justice series. That was one of the geniuses of it. And so, to get back to David's stuff, and some of the stuff that I so appreciated about it is, like, when you look at like how he did Aquaman, right? One of the things that I had such a hard time with was there was a semi-edict going through from DC, because there was this big mess that happened at the end of the 1970s run, where Aqua Baby was killed, and Arthur and Mara had like their beautiful storybook like life had just been shredded, and that didn't get dressed a lot in the 80s. It was dressed a little bit, a couple of miniseries that were written up on there, and Aquaman was appearing regularly in Justice League, but it didn't really get mentioned at all. And then you have the chance to have an Aquaman series again, but Mara can't be in it at first, right? And so Peter David tells the story where Arthur Castellet, he's abandoned by his friends and his family. He's lost an arm. He's maybe going crazy, and he runs into Dolphin from the Forgotten Heroes, right?
Yeah.
And they're both these lost souls. They end up getting involved in this really ill-fated and poorly advised relationship, because neither of them are relationship material at this point. And through their dysfunction, right? That's part of Aquaman's journey back to normalcy, right? To his own mind, to owning his history, to not being a victim anymore. And Aquaman doesn't always do the right thing in that series, right? But whether it's sleeping with this basically kid, because I mean, not child, but they're like, Aquaman's like 40 something, and Dolphin's like, in her early 20s or whatever. So that's out of it, or being cruel or whatever. The series is like this. I hate to use this pop psych term, but it's like a healing journey for Arthur. That is Arthur taking ownership and accountability for what he did wrong and what was done wrong to him as the story moves along. And so then you have this chance where, and it doesn't. David doesn't really get to write it when he leaves the series in completion, but when Jurgens comes in on the third main run, and you have a full reunification of Arthur and Mara, it feels earned, right? And Jurgens finished out that run by just picking up the pieces that David had left and unfinished, and Larson was in the middle and did some stuff that wasn't great. Some of it was okay, a lot of it wasn't great. But Jurgens came in and finished weaving the blanket that Peter David had laid down, and that blanket had actually been laid down back in the Atlantis Chronicles, right, when he was laying that out. And so you had this mythic epic of Aquaman that was done there, and it was. So this is what I was trying to get at. I was trying to talk earlier, is that Peter David got what he was writing, right? He understood, like in She-Hulk, he understood how to make a silly cheesecake action comic, right? In Young Justice, he understood how to tell a story of teens that was fun and exciting, and it was popcorn fun. It was Saturday afternoon matinee fun, it was just great. And with Aquaman, he told this huge mythic epic story, which was not at all, and this is the thing that blows my mind away, it's a different level of writing, but it's not at all incompatible with the early 1950s Aquaman stories when Mera was first introduced. Mm-hmm. It's that same kind of fantasy story, but instead of being written for 7-year-old girls, it's being written for adults in a lot of ways. And
it's a based Arthurian tale.
It is. It's a based Arthurian tale for boys and girls, right? So, and that's the thing is
I really enjoy his Aquaman stuff. It's probably my favorite.
Well, and then the other thing is, like I said, we was talking about X Factor earlier. He had some really hard-boiled detective stuff going on between the mutant silliness in X Factor. That's just dynamite. And how often do you meet a man, or you see the work of a man who could just play in all these different sandboxes, and he's not making, and he's conforming to the rules of the genres he's telling. He's bending the edges of those, but still staying true to who these characters are in a way that is engaging and legacy building, right? And one of my huge issues with the Jeff Johns run on Aquaman, and you guys might think this is the dumbest thing ever, because Jeff Johns did a good job of telling the characters and being true to the characters and revamping some of the history in good ways. But what I cannot stand is Peter David did such an amazing job of pulling the Atlantis from across the span of DC history, whether it's Golden Age Wonder Woman stories, whether it was the Silver Age Aquaman stories, whether it was Superman,
Lori
Lamaris from Superman,
right,
or Arion, Lord of Atlantis, the sword and sorcery story from the late 70s, early 80s. He wove all of that into his Aquaman, and he had this geography that was part of the storytelling, and it was amazing, right? And Atlantis was a continent with multiple cities and all these different kinds of outposts and thousands of years of history, right? And then Jeff Johns comes in New 52, and Atlantis is one little city. Just like, no, dude.
I have to say about Peter. I'm sorry, unless you're.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I didn't mean to. The big problem I had with Peter David's revamp of Aquaman was that he took away the Arthur Curry origin and had this thing where he's raised by dolphins. And then when he's like 18 or whatever age it was, he gets adopted by Tom Curry.
Yep.
And it's not the same, because he's, it's not, it just doesn't work for me. And I was really glad that they kind of they kind of moved it back to the old story when they made the movie, and they've kind of they've redacted that a bit. They've redacted that part of Peter David's take on the origin, because I mean, he doesn't even have a brother, and I've talked before about this, about trying to reconcile, how do you make Ocean Master interesting when he's like a surface dwelling half brother? It doesn't, it's like another child of Tom Curry with another woman who wants to rule the ocean. It makes no sense, and that origin never made any sense. And it's like it's one of those things that the animated series did better, and they're trying to so now Orm is an Atlantean, and that makes more sense, so there's things that they revamp, and from other media, they actually come up with better takes on the origin than what they're doing in the comics sometimes.
I was still not sold on. I really liked the Peter David was obviously borrowing from Rudyard Kipling to do his Aquaman thing, and I really appreciated that. I always liked it. I still like the idea of Aquaman having a dolphin family to a certain extent. But the thing that really sold me on the idea of being raised by Tom was the movie. James Wan nails that relationship, and the way he did it was in a way that I never imagined anyone pulling off. It's that mom and dad are both alive.
Yeah.
Right. So when you have the reunion of the Queen and Tom at the end of the first movie, my entire heart melted. I mean, and part of that is that I'm a dad. My kids are getting close to being grown up. They are grown up now. At the time the movie came out, they were in their teens. I've got this amazing wife, and so I was really feeling the whole story in my heart, and so that was part of the thing for me. But I'll tell you, that sold me on that origin, and I just in ways that I was a diehard, the Time and Tide is the definitive. Nobody should vary from David's Time and Tide miniseries, which was the miniseries that David did after the Atlantis Chronicles that led into the new Aquaman series.
Right. It was basically his year one.
It was his year one, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there was the Time and Tide, and there was a special, and then there was issue 1 of the Hook Hand series. Which I honestly gotta say, kind of missed the Hook Hand. Not gonna lie.
See, this is another thing. The animated series came up with a better reason for the Hook Hand.
Yes,
the much better thing where he cuts it off himself to save his baby. And I was like, that's amazing. I like that better than here's a villain you've never heard of before, and he's making a point, and he destroys his hand with Piranha just because you're showing.
See, I'm fine with the sacrifice.
It was just an excuse to give him a hook hand.
The original was dumb, and it made me dislike the hook hand in general. But the fact that you have the option of going with the sacrifice one, I could take or leave the hook hand.
Yep.
Yeah. I need to talk about one more thing with Peter David. And you may have noticed that I'm looking at my monitor while I'm listening to you. I have been looking.
Want to get back to this page.
What? Oh, sorry.
No, I thought you were looking because you just want to keep getting back to this.
No, not that page. No, I was looking through my Facebook. I wasn't wanting to talk about this anymore. You can take that down. No, I wanted to talk about, and I was looking for, how it is on Facebook. It's like you read something really great and then you could never find it again. I know that I read an amazing tribute to him from one of the comic. I was going through all my friends trying to find it. I could have sworn it was Sergio Cariello, but I went to his page and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find him talking about it. So I was like, who was it? Who was it? It was one of those names. It was one of those guys who's gone on to do independent stuff in his own self-published work. And he was talking about how the Peter David he's been pivotal in Young Justice, in Teen Titans Young Justice, all this stuff that he's done to help DC profit in cartoons, in live action, all these things that are based on his works. And he has been knocking himself out doing these, and then he's had health issues and he gets no help at all from DC or Marvel. And he's like, he says, this is a pattern. This has happened with, and he lists a whole bunch of comic creators that we've seen this for, that they spend their last years begging online for money because they have a health issue and they have no insurance or whatever. And you probably remember that story, Matt, about how, the people who went down to CrossGen, one of the things that made CrossGen amazing is that they had health insurance. And all these comic creators who never had health insurance went to a doctor for the first time in ages. Some of them lived longer because CrossGen existed, and they went to the doctor for once and found some stuff that prolonged their lives. It's like DC and Marvel don't do that. And this creator was just saying that, it kills him that Peter David had to spend like the last year begging for money after all this stuff that he has done. It's like he's written all these books that get republished by DC and Marvel, and he doesn't see enough money from that, to really, it's an income, but it's not DC's made millions, Marvel's made millions from his work, and he's not a millionaire. Nobody ends up a millionaire because their stuff is adapted into movies, which doesn't make sense. It's their stuff, but
you get orders of magnitude less than they do.
Yeah. And he was just
the frustrating part. Of the frustrating thing about that too is like, is that the other side of it too is you get those that like Chuck Dixon's talked about getting a pretty good, royalty checks for comics that are published. But when those ideas get put in other media, you don't necessarily get that.
Right.
But yeah, how many times have we on this show talked about how DC, especially DC, because it's one that you and I, Hutch, really care about.
Yeah.
They but not just them, but King and Marvel and Dell's got a back catalog they could be making money on. All these guys, they're not going to the archives to make product to sell, right?
Yeah.
If they were having affordable, accessible stuff, they would be selling out like you wouldn't believe. But no, like they're not even touching any of that stuff. And it's mind numbing that's going on, that people aren't pursuing that. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so these guys, it's so sorry. I just realized I hadn't finished my thought. So for David to say, well, I should be getting more money on royalties. Well, yeah, you would be if DC was publishing, if they were acting like if they were taking a page out of Scholastic's book and actually presenting their product that people want to the consumers
in places where they could see them. Yeah.
Places where they could see them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other message that this guy, and I wish I could remember who it was. It's not, I guess it isn't Sergio. I thought it was, because Sergio, of course, has gone on to self-publish his action Bible and stuff like that. And it was somebody like that who's gone on to great things. I could have sworn it was Sergio, but I couldn't find it. So this is the problem with Facebook. You just can't find where this post came from. He might have been posting in another group or something, and maybe that's why it came up, and not on his own wall. But he just said, do your own thing. Quit making millions for these big corporations that give you scraps, and instead go make your own thing, because it can hit and be worth it, and it will not be worth it to do this. And
the crazy thing about that is I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
But yet it was yesterday I was doing some yard work and I was listening to England Teen. For those of you guys who might remember, England Teen's one of his channels. He started off doing
the Owl
a review. What?
The Owl? England Teen?
No. Okay. England Teen's a YouTuber.
Well, okay.
And
he's been
probably named after the owl. What's that?
He's named after a misheard lyric from a song.
Oh, I thought it was from the Owls of Ga'Hoole,
Okay. No. This is
okay.
Long before that.
Okay.
Well, that's not
sorry. Go ahead.
Doesn't matter.
I got distracted. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Well, he was doing a review stream a couple days ago about the first issue of Dylan Dog, the Fumetti, the Italian comic, and it ended up being a retrospective of Peter David, because he got sick of talking about the comic and ended up talking about Peter David's work. He had looked up an editorial that David had written in the Comics Buyer's Guide about how little respect David had for people that jump ship from the people that brought them to the dinner, right? Brought them to the dance, and questioning whether Image would actually make anything worthwhile if they weren't willing to give their all to their contracted companies when they were working for them. And it's just really ironic for him to take that stand 30 years ago, and then to see where, he ended up, recently, like I said, asking for donations to pay for medical treatment.
Yeah.
And it's just, and thinking about the mountain of important work, but artistically vital work that Peter David put out.
Yeah. He wrote, and we haven't really touched on like his Star Trek books. He wrote the hardcover novel Imzadi, which was the backstory of Deanna Troi and William Riker. It's like the untold story about their relationship, and that was it was a good book. He's done a bunch of books with Q and things like that, and there's he did a good Borg book. I can't remember which one it was or what it was called, but I remember one good thing about it was that it's like, okay, so you get defeated one way and you find a way to solve it. If you fall into a black hole, you're not going to find out. It's not like you can't be killed by a black hole again. So I want to say that it was something like the planet killing, like the planet killer was like a device to be used against the Borg from the planet killer from the old series. It was something like that. I wish I could remember this. It's been way too long since I read all this stuff, but watch, it'll probably not even be a Peter David book. But it's been too long since I know I've read a lot of his books and they're really good. His Star Trek books are worth looking up if you can find them. And,
we haven't even talked about Supergirl, which, I mean, my gosh, the things that he did to rehab a largely throwaway replacement Supergirl, and to turn it into one of the most interesting, thought-provoking, right, redemptive comics that DC had published, right?
I've never read it.
Oh my goodness!
So, I was like, what, an Earth Angel? Are you kidding me? This is Supergirl.
Well,
I couldn't get past it. I'm sorry.
Well, the thing is it isn't Supergirl, right? That was the whole point, because there can't be a Supergirl because of the post-crisis edict about Krypton, and so they had Matrix, this flesh golem from a pocket dimension, and she'd been used, with varying degrees of success in different Superman books, and
I think I have an issue of that run, like, on me.
Oh,
yeah,
that's hilarious.
It's like I don't have a lot of things, but it's just one of the random things I happen to have.
That's great. Well, and the thing is that he took this silly superhero idea, this silly science fiction idea, and he married it to this horrifying horror story, right? Because that's really what that part of it is. It's just this terrifying B-movie horror story, and he ended up making this phenomenally transformative, redemptive corpus, and it's great. I mean, really, it's the backstory of his Supergirl series is absolutely something off of ought to be a Mystery Science Theater story. It's remarkable, and
unlike Superman, she has the ability to repair things on the molecular structure. There's like a literal line in the comic that I have. Like, she says this to herself in her head. She's like, "Oh yeah, he couldn't do this, but I could."
Remember, Superman can do the opposite. He can sing you to death.
That's also true. So, anyway.
All right, but I do have to pose a question here as a result of this, and I'll also pose it to the chat as well. Might as well. Danvers or Kent?
Danvers or Kent?
Right?
Well, Danvers. Yeah, the name.
Yeah, I mean that's Supergirl's last name.
Yeah. I get.
They reinvented her existence.
Yeah, she was in. Yeah, when they which one? You mean the Peter David one? Because that was definitely Danvers. There was a whole thing, but it wasn't the same Danvers.
No, it was like it was Linda, I believe was her name.
Yeah.
Linda Lee. Wasn't it Linda Lee, or that's pre-crisis? I don't know.
I think that's pre-crisis. It was Linda Lee.
No, it was Linda Danvers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was just Linda Danvers.
Maybe it was Linda Lee.
She was also called May.
2 L's, the 2L thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was May is what they called her before, and I think that
it's short for Matrix, obviously, but
right.
The name they spell it MAE.
I think the Peter David version of the character retained May as a middle name. I might be wrong about that, but I believe that is the case.
So do you prefer her as a Danvers or a Kent?
I mean...
I prefer Danvers, honestly. If that's your question. Didn't get that the first time.
The reason she was chosen to be a Danvers and was not a Kent was because the story that David was telling was of how this being without a soul saves the soul of a woman who's lost. And that's and that version of Linda Danvers was lost and broken and cruel and hardened and had wed herself to the devil. And through this interaction with this soulless being who wanted a soul, it saves Linda. Mm-hmm. So it gives her purpose and meaning and history and a reason for striving beyond her own failures. And it's great. I think it's obviously I like it. And so if I had to choose between the Silver Age Supergirl and Peter David's Supergirl, I prefer Peter David's Supergirl.
Well, and also in a vacuum, any Supergirl, I would just rather be raised by the Danvers than by the Kents, because you got to think too, by the time that she comes around, how much older the Kents are than when they were raising Superman, right? Uh-huh. And also she's already supposed to be kind of different, so I wouldn't want that almost like identical upbringing. I like the alternate upbringing. I think it helps shape both of their characters differently. I think it's just better that way.
I almost think that the character would work better if it wasn't called Supergirl, because once they decided to have, Clark, they introduced the Superman Batman story where they actually brought a Kryptonian Supergirl, and Clark Kent's like, oh, that's my cousin, and it's like they've never mentioned Matrix Supergirl ever again.
Right?
And it's like he never says anything like, there was a other Supergirl who wore a uniform much like this for years, and now there's going to be you, and that may be confusing to people. It never says anything like that. It's like they just, she appears and the other one never happened.
Yeah,
which is a big chunk of his history.
Yes, that is very.
At least they're both blondes, Maybe they're flying real fast. Nobody will know the difference.
As I have said before, DC Age of Reboot.
Well, I mean, and yeah, I agree. I think I don't understand the re-inclusion. There was a movement in, as much as there was really great stuff that was happening at the turn of the millennium in DC Comics, just before it all fell apart. There was some really fun stuff that was going on. Hawkman was going through a real renaissance in character. There was I think a lot of great Aquaman stuff was happening. But there were also a crew of writers that came in there that had a slavish devotion to the Super Friends, a slavish devotion to the Justice League as they read in 1970. And that brought in a lot of stuff. Oh, we have to do it this way because that's how it was then.
Yeah.
And Grant Morrison, what is wrong with you, man?
I knew we wouldn't be able to get through a conversation without talking about Grant Morrison.
He was one of them.
Yeah, but I've said before that the take on Supergirl in the animated series where she's from a nearby planet. She's not actually, Superman's cousin, but she poses as Clark Kent's cousin. It's like, that's a great little twist on it, and it really works for giving them different backgrounds and all that. I wish that they had just done that. And it's like they went from this, shape-shifting Matrix angel to the exact old Silver Age origin, which I got to tell you, when you remember the Millennium comics, when they reprinted all the best stories of DC with the little thing that said Millennium across the top.
Yep.
They did the Supergirl origin story, and I read it, and I was like, "You've got to be kidding me! This is so poochy. It is this forced character. It's like, hey, I'm exactly like you, except I'm a girl, and I can do all the things you can do, and I'm going to go and get adopted by a family just like you were adopted, and I will have a secret identity. I'll wear a different wig, and I will look different, but I'm just like you, Superman." It's like in one story, they do all this in the most obvious, hey girls, how about something for you to enjoy? It's terribly written. It is horribly written.
It really sounds like so much of what we see in Hollywood nowadays, especially from things like Marvel.
The Batgirl, the Batgirl series.
Right. Like every female character has to come along and just at 100% power right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I
like the idea that she was that she was older, but already a teenager, and then put into like a cryostasis or whatever, and then just ends up at the Earth later on. But I like the idea that she spent her like formative years in a Kryptonian society. I think that already makes like a really big difference between the two characters, because then she's
talked about, right? It's never really dealt with.
Yeah. And it should be more, because it gives you more of like this fish out of water story it's almost like the opposite of what happens when somebody gets isekai'd and they're a fish out of water. It's like, instead of going to like this strange land, they're here on Earth, right? And now it's just like deal with like Earth society. And for all you know, on Krypton, girls were usually the ones that make the first move. So every time that like a boy comes up to her to try to date, then it's like a weird thing. Like, why are they doing this? Like there could be all these fun things you could play with that like everybody just doesn't even touch.
Yeah, they never exploited that in the Silver Age. You're right. It's like, that is a neat thing that they're kind of taking an aspect that has always been there that they never did anything with, and this new version they do. And I admit that. I just wish that they would go with the Argo, the planet Argo, which is kind of a spin on the Argo City, where it was like this city that was exploded and everybody survived because of the dome. And it's like, but there was a nuclear explosion below them. You'd think that they would all be flattened, but okay, they all survived. So it's just one of those
Kryptonian tech. You can always just blame it on Kryptonian tech.
And let's pretend we don't know how gravity works.
Right.
Okay. Well, guys, I think that we have run into the end of the show here, guys. I do know that in the future, I do not know when, we are going to be doing a Takusatsu feature episode. So,
I like tacos. That's good.
No, the tokusatsu is the special filming for Japanese TV shows. For people out in the audience who don't know, basically that involves special effects, but obviously there are specific types that we have in mind, like henshin shows. I think is the first thing that comes to everybody's mind.
Yep. That's exactly what we're looking at there. Those.
You're talking like Power Rangers stuff.
Yes.
Super Sentai, Kamen Rider. Yeah.
Yep. The Japanese superhero team, masked superhero teams.
Oh, can we talk about Ninja Turtles?
It'll probably come up. Or do you want to have a whole show just about Ninja Turtles?
No. I'm just saying that would be.
There's a really good crossover with Power Rangers in Space, where the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle like TV series from the time somehow ended up at the planet that they were at. It's very, very crazy. It's worth a watch for anybody who hasn't seen it before.
That sounds nuts. So, anyway, all of that aside, but I think if you guys are up for it, the first few issues of All-Star Batman and Robin, we want to go ahead and go on with our Batman series and what we think for next week. What do we think? Are we up for reading a chunk of Frank Miller?
Oh boy. I think we should do that. I think it would be very interesting. Although I know I'm going to hate it.
But I'll warn you, he never finished it.
Right.
Well, we'll probably
the
only
worst
catch
part of it all.
Fly Fox says I'll skip those shows. Both of them. Ooh, man, that's harsh.
If it helps any, he did not draw them.
So that's harsh, Fly Fox, especially because the Henson Takusatsu show we're doing specifically is going to highlight a couple of indie creators that want to talk about their work in the genre. So, I would encourage you to think again.
Ooh, are we going to bring up Sporkman Goes to Japan again?
Probably. We'll probably bring Sporkman Goes to Japan again. We'll probably talk about Riser Man.
You remember you brought up Riser Man before.
We have.
Yeah.
And there's another fellow who's interested in coming on. Hang on, I gotta get rid of my dog for a second. You gotta come at the very end of the show and start barking. Goodness sakes.
He doesn't like the idea of All-Star Batman and Robin either.
The same.
I have doomed everyone.
We could have just.
To be fair, though, I don't know if I've personally enjoyed any DC comic that has had the word All-Star put in front of it. So,
isn't it all Miller anyway?
I like All-Star Squadron.
I haven't read that one, so I can't speak on it.
Yeah, it's from the 80s, so it probably is very different. But
maybe that might actually be my exception to that rule if I end up reading it.
Do you know what All-Star Squadron is?
No, I have no clue what it is.
Oh, goodness. Roy Thomas basically took every Golden Age character and had FDR say, I need you to be a wartime fighting team. And so everybody from Earth 2 is in this team in World War II. That's what sold. Yeah. It's really good. Okay. Hi. You back?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My camera decided to stop working after I dropped myself out for some reason.
My show now.
Oh, I'm so annoyed.
You are the only one with the face as of this moment.
So, what were we talking about? All-Star Squadron, which is one of my favorites.
It's because I said I've yet to read anything from DC that had All-Star in front of it, and then he brought up All-Star Squadron, which I'd never heard before, and it's like, from what he described, it sounds to me like the big exception to the rule that if I end up reading
All-Star Squadron is almost like a thesis paper about the Golden Age, because it's actually written with like editor's notes about when it falls between events that are being published. So it will reference comic books that are being published at the time, and if you had access to the DC library, you could actually read what was happening to Batman before he shows up in this issue of All-Star Squadron or whatever.
Okay, so here's an idea. What if we put our audience through the ringer here? We start out with All-Star Batman and Robin, then we do All-Star Superman, and then if they make it through all of that, they get rewarded by doing All-Star Squadron.
Oh, I could cover that annual with Ian Carkle. It's just one of the most awesome stories.
Yeah.
Well, you want to talk annotations.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have to remember that the purpose of our current quest is to seek out Batman stories specifically about whether they're good or not.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. And
Batman's in that though.
Batman is in it, but it's not particularly Batman's story.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, definitely. Doing a retrospective of All-Star Squadron at some point in the next year would be really great. Definitely something we should do. I have been needing to go back and reread them. I've been needing to go back and reread them for years. The other thing is that like they were all Earth 2 pre-crisis Batman, so you should do a Batman story I have so I can participate. Fly Fox says. Well, yeah. Well, maybe. Well, we'll have to
give a list.
What?
You said for once he has, give us a list, you know, and
give
you
us a
put
list.
it
Yeah, there you
backstage
go.
or whatever, and maybe it'll fall into one you could jump to.
Yeah, that'd be great. But anyway, yeah, but so the series actually gets derailed because of the crisis, and that then they spun off to Young All Stars, which I really really liked Young All Stars for the most part, but that's a whole different thing. So, the one. Sorry, I keep going on here. But that's it. That's the show. Next week, All Star Batman. So tune in, and we'll see if we think it's worth the hype or not, and we'll go from there. Ooh, we actually should do the
world's
that's actually
finest.
a really good one.
Yeah.
That one goes on the list for sure. Okay,
I like World's Finest. Yeah.
Next week, Batman, and then we'll let you all know what happens after that for sure. And until then, get out there and find out why my camera doesn't work. I mean, go out there and read some comics. We'll catch you guys all around. Okay. Bye.
Bye.